So now let's talk a little bit about weed. It is really a problem. We all understand that, the way the system is structured. Banks can't play directly. There are massive amounts of cash being moved around in armored cars. The fraud risk, the theft risk, the general inefficiency of that process is massive. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. And our moderator is going to be Dale Lessig, Senior Staff Writer from the Green Sheet. He's been around payments for a really long time. He's managed sales teams at leading acquirers, and he has served on the ETA's Technology Committee for the U.S. Payments Forum and the Northeast chapter of WNET rather. She's an alumni of SUNY Excelsior and has an MS in Management from Argosy University. So with that, let's welcome Dale and her panel.
So by now, we've all seen the amazing effect of technology on the cannabis industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry that's being impacted by an evolving regulatory environment. So we know that technology can solve problems. We know that technology can improve compliance. But what we don't know is how much it can do at the customer level to improve the experience, and also what it's doing for merchants. So we don't have a lot of time. What I'd like to do is just briefly introduce my panelists. Brianna Moriarty, a marketing and business development professional, has been with Star Micronics for about 4 years. She earned a BA in communications from Rutgers University and completed several marketing certification courses and programs. Her expertise is in content creation. She currently works as partner development manager at Star, helping ISV and VAR partners grow their business through strategic marketing campaigns. Dustin Ide is CEO at CanPay, the first legitimate debit payment platform for the cannabis industry. With a background in payment solutions ranging from traditional retail and e-commerce with banks and technology partners, Dustin looked at the legal marijuana industry and applied his knowledge of the payment space to a new market that lacked access to traditional financial services. He launched CanPay in November of 2016, and he currently serves over 300 dispensaries and recreational shops across 16 states, making it the largest legitimate payment network for the cannabis industry. Thomas Gavin is CEO and Vice Chairman of Canatrack Technology. Gavin has used his diversified background in marketing, government, and lending to assist Canatrack grow, scale, and improve their CanaCard platform to become the first universal cashless payment solution in the cannabis industry. CanaCard is a HIPAA-compliant, cashless payment platform that provides ease for consumers, increased product marketability for retail merchants, and transparency and due diligence for financial institutions to help them satisfy their regulatory requirements. So the first question that I have for my panelists is, why is transparency essential for success in this market? Dustin?
Well, transparency differentiates you from everything that's been tried really in the past at this point in the cannabis industry. Everybody wants a major card brand solution, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express. All the card brands have prohibited such activity on their networks and continue to do so. So much of the industry has relied on miscoding, misclassifying, hiding behind a third-party service, or operating under a name that doesn't actually exist as far as a DBA. And so from our standpoint, we wanted to build a network where every merchant did business in their own DBA name. And that requires you to be transparent at the consumer level, at the merchant level, and through the financial services. All the institutions that touch the payment have to know what you're doing, or else if they're not on board, they will shut it down. And that's where the transparency really differentiates in the cannabis industry.
Brianna?
Yeah, I think you pretty much summed it up. I'll start by saying that Star Micronics is not a payments company. So I'm bringing a little bit of a different perspective to it. I mean, first, transparency is important for success in any type of industry or market. But when we look at all of the compliancy that's necessary in the cannabis market today and how difficult it is to make these payments, these credit card payments, a viable solution, you know, having that transparency and understanding what you're getting yourself into when you start accepting credit card payments as a cannabis dispensary and the loopholes that you're going to go through to do it are really important for everyone involved.
Thank you. Tom?
Well, I think both of my co-panelists here summed it up very, very well. The one thing, generally speaking, we have to remember is when dealing with the cannabis industry, you're still dealing with a federally illegal substance. And most importantly, for a bank to feel comfortable taking that money in at all, they need to see everything from open to close. They want to know where every dollar is spent, where, you know, every dime has been moved. So if you can't provide that, it makes it very, very uncomfortable for a bank to take that risk. And if a bank can't take that risk, we actually also lack safety. So to provide full transparency is to give everybody the option to bank. Without transparency, this industry is going to have a lot of trouble, and it's an industry that's not going anywhere for a while. So that's actually what basically all of us sitting up here have intended to do.
I also wanted to mention, as a payments industry journalist who's been covering this topic for years, I've had the opportunity to interview each of my panelists on a one-on-one basis and learn about what they're doing in the space. And the thing that's really interesting to me is that in addition to just doing everything that we would expect them to do, you know, improve transparency, improve compliance, make it legal and easier for everyone in the value chain, they're doing something a little bit more than that. And that is they're making the merchant feel more comfortable, because these merchants have faced tremendous regulatory pressure, and they have given them the cachet of creating a beautiful experience for their customer. It doesn't have to be like going to DMV when you go to a cannabis dispensary. It should be an enjoyable environment that will make customers want to return. And the next question that I have is, how has your solution improved the customer experience at participating cannabis dispensaries?
I'll go ahead. So as a not really cannabis payments company, it's kind of funny how we fell into this role about 4 or 5 years ago. We had a lot of point of sale software companies developing software specifically for cannabis dispensaries knocking on our door, and they were a really big fan of our receipt printers and cash drawers. I think mostly for the aesthetic, mostly the look, and we continue to work with these companies and understand how quickly this market was growing and how much, how many loops they had to go through just to run this type of business. So something that we were getting asked repeatedly was the need for a scale that integrated with the point of sale. So about a year ago, we answered that call, released our line of scales, and are really looking to not just provide the hardware in the storefront, but be a full solution from seed to sale in terms of hardware.
Right.
So when we set out and launched CanPay, our goal was to create as close of a traditional payments experience as possible, with maybe some advantages or benefits that we, since we were starting from scratch, could add in. And so we launched a mobile-only, ACH-based consumer payment app. We're not allowed in any of the app stores because they reject cannabis payment tools. So we actually had to develop a progressive web app to deliver our app. And actually, that's turned out very well. It's where a lot of the industry is moving in anyway, as far as apps go. And that allows you to have a very similar experience to a native app without actually having to have an app on the device. They're calling up a containerized website, looks and feels like a mobile app. And our payment experience is highly secure. And so we wanted that function. We knew if we were going to build a consumer brand in the cannabis industry that it had to be secure. So consumer enrolls in our program, links their checking account. We validate both sides, the identity and the banking information. And then from that point forward, when they want to pay, they simply log into the CanPay app, generate a single-use payment PIN that's either a 7-digit code or a QR code, and they scan that into the merchant's device. The merchant never receives any consumer information or banking data, and so it's a highly secure transaction. Other than that, the experience is very similar to paying with the debit card that you would get anywhere else. And so now you've got a no cost to the consumer solution when the industry has, for the most part, pushed off cost, the convenience fee, ATM fees, whatnot, onto the consumer. And now you have a free to the consumer payment experience that's electronic, so they're not bringing cash into the store or having to use that ATM. And it's very quick. It's much quicker than obviously counting cash, having to give cash back.
So a lot like Dustin, we did a lot of the same things. We have a app which resides in both Google Play and the Apple Store. However, it is a lot like yours in the respect that we call it a hybrid, which is a progressive. They're the same thing essentially. But our big thing was, obviously, the consumer is very important and probably the most important. But there are also, for us, was the back end of the system. And our back end, since our system is ongoing, a person can load their card, a consumer can load their card and preload their card for multiple uses. We developed it as a reloadable gift card. And that said, we have a physical card and a mobile app that do both the same thing, essentially function as a gift card or mobile app, like going to Starbucks. That was kind of our motto. That's what we looked at. Something consumer friendly, something easy, something people were used to. But on the back end, what was the bank looking for? What was the biggest problem that we saw? Wasn't the consumer, it was the ability for the retailer to gain that bankability. So what we did is we built a back end on our system, and that back end in real time shows all transactions. As I said earlier, every dime that's spent runs through that system. Your client, you take a look at, pull them up, you log in as the bank, you can see everything that's gone on. Who sold the cannabis, what register it came from, a complete audit trail of every dollar spent. So our big thing was not only obviously the consumer experience, but the bankability for the retailer. And that's why we did ours the way we did it.
Awesome, thank you. The next thing that I'd be remiss if I didn't cover is, the whole issue of compliance and what the solution does to make it easier for everybody to be compliant. And I think that, to Brianna's point, having a piece of equipment that simplifies compliance is really pretty unique. And you mentioned before, I think in one of our interviews, you have a majority market share with one of your products. Is that right?
We do currently. We probably hold about 85% market share in terms of point of sale hardware in the cannabis market right now. And I think to answer your question on compliance, when you think about compliance in the cannabis industry, two of the biggest factors are record keeping and tracking of the product, so the seed to sale. So what we're looking to do, again, is get beyond just printing out a receipt, which is equally as important, proving that you're purchasing your marijuana legally, but making sure that there are solutions to track that flower from seed to sale production with labeling. The scales are eliminating risk of human error as it integrates right with the point of sale, and it's something that we've only answered, as a hardware company, because all of these ISVs that we're working with have been requesting it for years, just products and hardware, and we didn't realize how big of a piece it was in it, but solutions to really make their business simpler and run like an actual retail facility rather than something that's looked at as, a little more taboo or incorrect.
Exactly. Dustin, how has CanPay helped improve compliance?
So if you're going to operate a financial services or banking product in the cannabis industry, the key element, the key guidance that you must follow is called the FinCEN guidance for banking marijuana-related businesses. If you don't have a mechanism to ensure that all activity falls within that guidance, then it's already a federally illegal service, right? Money transfer of product that is, it's Schedule 1, so it's money laundering. But there's guidance that tells the industry, the banking industry, if you're going to provide services to this industry, here's how you have to do it. And it encompasses the 8 priorities of the Cole memo, which Jeff Sessions rescinded the Cole memo last year in January, but the Department of Treasury, FinCEN, kept their component for the financial institutions. So we currently count about 50 financial institutions that are banking the cannabis industry under the federal guidance openly with their regulators. Some markets have nearly 100% banking access. The industry commonly has been said to be cash only without banking. That's not true, it's certainly underbanked. But for our services, we wanted to be a payment tool that institutions that were operating compliance programs could rely on for their customers to be able to receive payments in a stable, transparent way. And so all of our merchants must be banking within a compliant cannabis banking program before they can start accepting CanPay. So we're nearly 400 now dispensaries across 19 states. So that number's even changed, obviously, since we issued the information. So it's a rapidly growing market, but again, that banking piece is necessary because all of the proper reporting, all of the due diligence has to be done on both sides of the transaction. We are operating inside of a compliance program at an institution that's currently banking approximately $2 billion a year in cannabis funds. And so we're in their compliance program regularly reviewed with their federal bank examiners to ensure that all of the activity is compliant with that guidance so that no adverse action is taken against the financial institution or us.
Excellent, thank you.
So, congratulations. That's awesome because your numbers have gone up dramatically in the last few weeks. That's fantastic. What CanAttract did was basically we built a front end and a back end to our platform. Obviously, there's a consumer-facing front end, but there's also a retailer-facing front end. And that front end is a vetting service. Dustin had discussed a little bit about FinCEN and AML and BSA, Bank Secrecy Act, anti-money laundering regulations. Obviously very important. One of the big things that he had brought up was FinCEN. And with FinCEN, there is an initial vetting of the individual as well as continued due diligence. And it's considered extraordinary due diligence, which is the exact verbiage they use in the guideline. That said, what we have done is we built a front end that vets that retailer prior to them coming on to the platform. And if they don't meet certain criteria, they don't get on. That doesn't stop with the initial vet. That continues every 90 days. So it's very easy to open a dispensary in the sense that you know what you need. You can get the license. Obviously, it's costly. It's time consuming. But once you get it, in order to keep it, you have to stay within lines. In order to keep our service, you have to stay within lines too. We obviously took the banking side of this very, very seriously. That is the background where most of our executives came from, was banking, trading. So we understood regulatory necessity. So doing the vetting up front, doing the continued vetting, that's been huge. The back-end transparency, huge. As of actually this morning, we have signed a deal with a bank. So now not only are we signing up customers for our platform, we're signing up people for bank accounts. So they'll be able to do one universal application, and all of that due diligence is a one-time deal. They don't have to go to us, go to a bank. We found that would probably be the easiest way to service everything. So, sorry, that kind of dropped that one on you. But we literally,
I mean, congratulations.
that was a couple hours ago. So,
That's huge.
so we have one universal application that will go out to all of the retailers. The retailers will sign up for not only the CannaCard platform, but also sign up to be vetted for a bank account, which is ideally what everybody's looking to do.
I think this is proof positive of the exponential growth of this industry. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, Dustin had 16 states, and now it's up to 19. Tom just signed a major banking agreement. It's very clear that this is a growing industry and it's here to stay. So that's a perfect segue to my next question, which is, I'd like to ask each of my panelists, what advice do you have for third-party providers who are entering the cannabis market?
Okay.
Stick with the order. We'll stick with the order.
All right. So, from where I sit currently in my role working with ISVs who are creating point of sale software, so many of them are currently going after the cannabis market. I work with a number of them that are dedicated to the cannabis market, and then we have retail point of sale companies that want to get into the cannabis market because it's growing so rapidly and the market's becoming really saturated really fast. So my biggest piece of advice would be to, if you're going to do something that's already been done, make sure it stands out and make sure you have the marketing and the brain power behind it. But the biggest piece of advice is to try something new. Look at the trends already happening in standard retail markets, because in 5 years or so, the cannabis industry is going to be mainstream. It's going to be a general retail market. It's going to be like walking into a liquor store or something along that nature. So look at what other markets are doing and kind of try to follow suit with the cannabis type of spin on it.
Excellent. Thank you.
If you're going to build a product or a service for the cannabis industry, make sure that you involve every potential partner that would be involved in the payments chain. There's a lot of misinformation in the industry that there's a debit or credit card based service that is openly available to the industry. We see it come up all the time, and then we see them go down all the time. And the reason for that is because you may get a bank involved or you may get a technology provider involved, but if you don't go all the way to the card brands and get their permission, which they have told us actively that until federal law changes, they won't participate in the industry. So that means that you're building your solution on an unstable grounding. And so that's why we chose to operate on the ACH platform. We could be completely transparent with our financial institution partners, with everyone involved in the chain. We undergo heavy state regulatory oversight. The bank regulators visit our institution all the time, and we're part of that. And so it has to be very stable. It has to be in conjunction with all of the participants in the payments chain. Otherwise, you're going to get a call at some point that says, you have to get out of the industry because this isn't approved somewhere, some way. And that's a really disruptive experience for your brand, for your consumers, and for your merchants.
100% what they said. Just to add to that, the big thing is funding. Always make sure that going into this industry, the cannabis industry is extremely expensive. And no matter how many corners you're able to cut, as far as I know somebody here, or I know somebody there, or I can get this done for a little less money, it's still going to be very expensive. Make sure you have a great plan. As I believe Dustin said, make sure you have a great network. Was that you or was that Brianna? Oh,
I agree.
okay. Someone just said that, so I apologize, but you make sure that, yeah, make sure you have a great network. And, you know, it is great to get that deal out there, but make sure that if there's an expectation of cost out there, highball it, you know. Really make sure you have enough money. You can never go back to the well that many times without offending somebody. So that's my best advice right there.
Wow. Yeah, so in other words, the cannabis industry is a long game. Right.
That is very true.
Yeah, so, but it's a profitable one. Thank you for everybody. We still have time now. I'd like to open it up for questions and answers. Dave Lott from the Federal Reserve. Somebody,
Question, how big of a problem is it with the merchants trying to disguise, you know, their name and operation? I saw an article the other week in one of the major banking publications talking about like a food truck. That actually was selling cannabis, but the transaction came under Joe's Taco Stand or something such as that.
Yeah, I would say that probably 80% of operators in the cannabis industry have access to some kind of debit or credit card-based electronic payment mechanism. In our conversations, we've gone to the top legal counsels and the brand/compliance managers at the card brands, and they've all told us that any of the options that we've presented are disallowed. There are attempts at a credit for a gift card for cannabis, credit for crypto for cannabis, hidden merchant account, as you described, operating on the debit rails. I think that's probably just because there's a little bit less flagging done on the debit rails, that those tend to last a little bit longer than what we've seen. But most of the operators in the cannabis industry have some kind of card-based solution that if you run your card through that system, it's going to highlight in some way a hidden mechanism. We've seen overseas merchant accounts in addition to those just described. And there's real risks for the merchants because they don't really understand what's going on. Not that long ago, a gift card-based program actually ceased operations, and we were told by some of their customers that individually they had $30,000 to $50,000 in funds that had never been settled out to them, and they're still waiting on those funds, hoping that operator gets back up. So on the payment side, it's a critical issue. It's happening almost everywhere that this is being hidden per the card brand rules, right? You've got the guidance around how to name a business. You've got prohibited transactions. And just because a gift card or a crypto purchase is an allowable credit card transaction, the actual nature of this is specifically for conversion to store credit at a cannabis institution. So all you're doing is masking that transaction. So major.
Honestly, not a lot to add. That is 100% true. I can tell you a quick story, actually. Two times ago in Denver, went out there with the founder of my company. Stopped in a dispensary. We had to buy some stuff for friends, if you will, but ended up with a receipt for tires. So we bought 2 new tires and got back, and he goes, "You're never going to believe this." I said, "What are you talking about?" Looked at the receipt. Sure enough, you know, I'm positive no matter how strong my friend's stuff was, I knew I didn't get new tires, you know? So yeah, it's out there. It's definitely very, very prevalent. And you know, you just, there's not much I can add. You covered pretty much everything, Dustin. So.
So for like the casual or
I can speak to our network. You can use CanPay wherever it's accepted and wherever it's allowed. So we have nearly 100% adoption in the Florida market. A Florida patient traveling to Denver can open up the app and find a location there that they could use. So there's a network or snowball effect to that. Most consumers, if they're a once every 6 months kind of a deal, they're probably just going to use the ATM or bring cash. So you're right in that. The more prevalent a solution gets, the more likely someone is to sign up for it. We're also working on expanding outside the cannabis industry because we're ACH based as a card payment network. We could get below regulated debit costs for a traditional retailer. And so we're looking for the right avenue and the right partners to expand in that space to add more value. So definitely a concern and issue, and cash is not going away. Even in those stores where there is a credit or debit card based system, they're somewhere between 50 to maybe 70% usage of that card within the store. So the rest is cash. Cash is still a major issue regardless.
Actually, what Dustin had mentioned about going into the other retail markets, that is something that we did. The first group of stores that we signed on was through a distributor, which was a retail distributor. We signed a little over 18,000 accounts on back in February, and that is, that's where we're making it up. As far as money left on cards, it's going to happen. There's no way around it. In our case, we function as a reloadable gift card. It's almost expected. For the consumer, it's a small loss. For us, it's a minor liability. However, it's always out there if they want to use it. There's not a whole heck of a lot we can do about it.
So in my state, which is California, you got the state rules. A county could have different rules, and even the city inside the county can have different rules. How do you keep on top of all that? That's
Good attorneys. I hate to tell you, that is the real answer. That's all you can do. You find yourself a really good legal team. We talked about a good network before, and that's it. You find yourself a law firm that functions in multiple states and, can give you referrals, at least in the states that they don't work.
To address that from our standpoint, in addition, that's definitely necessary, and they've saved us a number of times from both cost and issues. But also having those local banking partner relationships, because they're the ones that are really ensuring that their clients are operating within the compliance of all of the various state, city, and county licenses.
Thank you. That was a showstopper of a last question. Oh, maybe I overstayed. There's one more question, and we have
No
about
pressure.
three. Okay.
Just a real quick one for Dustin. How easy is it, or maybe just talk about the difficulty with using the ACH network in terms of getting that off the ground? Because I think the way they participate and the way that just the way that they function, just the very nature of it, does that come with just 1,000 obstacles right away, or is that something that has gotten easier?
It's not necessarily easier. Easy is never a word that I would use related to this industry or building a
Very
consumer
true.
payment brand. Everybody knows the major card brands, and they're used to that. ACH has it's a great network, and there are some advantages to it, particularly cost. But there are also some disadvantages. And so for us to launch, we launched in our first dispensary. First pilot was in June of 2016. So we've had over 3 years now of operations in dispensaries. And the growth was slow in the beginning, very slow. And we expected that, but it was slower than we expected. And as Tom said, with the funding and the expense. So I would say that it's not easy. We've added tools that allow for that that person that wants to sign up right away and use CanPay. They can do so within just a couple of minutes and spend right away. We have that capability now. As we added that, it became much more viable for the consumer. We have a great way of handling risks and returns and whatnot. So that's a part of what you have to build into a solution. So no, it's not easy. We've learned a lot. And so I think we're a lot better at it today than we were 3 years ago. But it's not easy. Without an authorization network, you're dealing with educating consumers around funding timeline and how to use it, and wanting to input their banking information. Fortunately for us, we're in an industry where there really isn't a viable alternative. And so if we were competing just straight against credit cards and debit cards in any other industry, you would see significantly lower adoption.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We are out of time now, but I appreciate it.